Hi guys, welcome to my video. So today I was going over some studies for injury prevention in amateur boxing, and I thought that's something that some of you might be interested in. So I'm going to share it with you now. This is the first video I've made like this, so it's probably not going to be very good, but here we go. So the first things first is I looked at the injury rates in amateur boxing. So per 1,000 hours, the injury rates in training are 0.5. But in competition is about 2,500 times higher. It's 1,221 injuries per 1,000 hours. And then combined training and competition is about one injury per 1,000 hours. So the injury rate in boxing is relatively low, especially compared to other sports like rugby and football. Um, but the injury rate in competition is very, very high. So that's something that we need to think about when we're training boxers. Um, and despite the low injury rates in training, we need to consider that boxers are usually quite tough and they might not report these injuries. So some caution with the data is recommended. And this shows that it's the intensity activity and not just the amount of hours you perform it that's the most important. Okay, so looking at the nature of the injuries, about a third of these are concussions, just under a third are cuts and lacerations, and just under a fifth are fractures, and these are mainly caused by being hit. So these would occur in sparring and competition, and the other, just under a fifth, are mainly upper body strains and sprains, particularly the shoulder, the hands, and the wrist, and these are mostly sustained by throwing punches. So you can see that the actual kind of strength and conditioning part of boxing is relatively safe. That's not where the injuries are coming from. The injuries are coming from the actual kind of fighting. Another thing to bear in mind is the previous history injury is a strong factor, particularly with like the other injuries. So if an athlete or yourself has a history of shoulder, hand, wrist, elbow injuries, then that's definitely something that I think you should take into account. And then we can see by these figures how important it is to avoid injury. 55% of boxers that get injured during a fight lose the fight, and only just over a third win. So there's definitely an interest in avoiding injury besides the discomfort and just losing days to training. So injury prevention is fairly important. Okay, so moving on to the recommendations for concussion, neck strength and circumference is very important. Um, because a stronger neck will be able to absorb the force of the blow, and that's going to stop the head from kind of like bouncing around in the skull. Studies have shown that for every pound increase in neck strength, the odds of the concussion decrease by 5%. Also, recommend the coach would limit intense sparring and competitive fights. So I know a lot of boxers probably might not be too keen on this, but it might be a good idea. And actually, not using head guards has been shown to reduce the rate of concussion. So this probably is linked to confidence. So when you have padding on your head, you're more likely to just weigh in and take a shot. And when someone's a very strong puncher, that padding, they're going to go through that padding, and a lot of it is the repetition of the hits that are important rather than how hard a single hit is. Also, the head guards are going to reduce the vision of the boxer to see the punches, and the referee or the trainer might not be able to see when they're in trouble. So I think you should take those off when you're sparring. And you should incorporate isometric. So isometric is where you're kind of holding your position against an external resistance, and eccentric, which is where you're resisting kind of external resistance as it pushes you down. Lateral flexion as well, um, and anti-rotation. Okay, flexion would be when the force is coming in front of you behind, and you're using the neck flexors to resist. Lateral flexion would be the side muscles in the neck, and rotation will be when the force is rotating your head. So for the rotation, um, you're probably going to need like a harness, or to use manual resistance. There's also some evidence that clenching like a mouth guard can increase neck strength. So that's something that you might want to incorporate. Okay, moving on to the shoulder. One of the risk factors is insufficient range of motion in the shoulder joint, imbalances or lack of strength in the rotator cuff muscles, and anomalies in the scapular position and movement. So I recommend you undertake a mobility program. You engage in scapular retraction exercises. So these could be face pulls, all types of rows, and horizontal and vertical pull exercises. So like pull-ups, maybe some shrugs as well. Okay, for the hand and wrist, a major factor is forearm size and strength, because a stronger arm will be able to kind of resist the forces and hold all the bones in place. Grip strength may be an important factor. It's definitely an important factor in recovery from these injuries. You should always tape your hand and wrist for extra stability, and incorporate exercises that challenge grip, so pull-ups, deadlifts, and an exercise like that. Okay, so that's everything I have today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, you can just ask, and I'll see if I can help.